Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024, and I'm going to keep going here with Joshua. We're going to see, I think we left off at Othniel, which was basically Caleb's, it looks like he was his brother's grandson. They call him his younger brother, but if you, that's a term that's used kind of used loosely in Judaism. It's going to be kind of, it could be a cousin, could be somebody who's, a relative, but they're going to call them their brother, and obviously he's younger. So based on the Book of Chronicles, it looks like it is his brother's grandson. So this is going to be, remember Caleb would have been 80 years old when they went into the Promised Land, and Joshua was going to die 20 years later, so that would mean Caleb would be 100 if he lived that old. His younger, basically it's his grandnephew, is going to emerge in the latter half of his life when after everybody has died. So that means he would have been a pretty young man when he helps Caleb take Hebron, and then he's going to kind of rise up in the next generation when they start going astray, and he's going to defeat this king Cushan. Let's see. Cushan Rishathaim, and I believe this guy to be one of the Kassite kings of Mesopotamia, so they would have been people who were related to Nimrod, who would have rose back up after the Amorites fell. And then they're going to have rest for 40 years. So by this time, they're probably in a ballpark of somewhere around 80 years into the Promised Land. You've got his 40 years, you've got the 8 years that they were in captivity, you've got probably a little bit of space of time between Joshua dying, because it says he died, and then all the elders who entered in the Promised Land with him and saw the works of the Lord died. So that could be people who were in the wilderness and saw, some of the supernatural deeds. That could just be people who saw the Lord defeat, tear down the walls of Jericho and all that. It's kind of loose. It's kind of hard to tell, and there are some discrepancies in Jewish history and in the New Testament on how long they account this age. You've got Paul saying it's 450 years in Acts 13 between basically the whole period of Judges. He counts it as 450 years, but then you've got First Kings. I think it's 6:1 when it talks about the building of the temple, and it accounts 480 years between them receiving the law and the building of the temple. That's the date that I keep in my overall chronology. But Josephus accounts 592 years between in that same period. So Josephus definitely thinks that number in First Kings is wrong. That seems to be a tradition held in Paul's day, and Paul, when he's speaking in Acts 13, he might just be repeating the tradition. It doesn't necessarily say Paul was full of the Holy Spirit, so it's not like he's necessarily inspired to be giving, the speech he's giving. He's just giving the gospel, and in that context, he's kind of accounting Israel's history, and then he leads it up to David and how David saw corruption, and then Christ coming. So Paul could be speaking in generalities and just using the traditional, dating method that they have. But it definitely disagrees with First Kings. There's a lot of people who've tried to go at that and try to reconcile the two dates, and you just can't. So I've tried to do my own work on it to try to make the 480 years work, and what I do is I look at some of these judges as being concurrent with one another, and we'll get to that when we get to Ehud and Barak and Gideon. So I'm going to probably try to take you guys up to, remember we did those last two stories at the end, so I'm going to try to take you at least through Gideon today, and then we'll just try to do the rest in one setting. So maybe we'll go a little farther, we'll see. But now after that, we're going to have, so this is Othniel, so we got 48 years here. We've got 20 years into the wilderness, and however many years before this generation starts to go bad, which seems to be about another 20, maybe 30, 40 years. It's hard to really tell, but again, these are numbers. This is not an exact chronology here. What we have, we're taking the word of whoever wrote First Kings, that there were 480 years between the building of the temple and the giving of the law, and we're going to try to cram this in to make it work. So it says the land had rest for 40 years, and Othniel the son of Kenaz died. So basically, the last 40 years of his life, they were good. And then the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. So remember what I told you. When you go through the history of Judges, you're going to find most of these kings rise up one time during this period, and then they get put down and they don't really rise again. The ones who are going to persist is going to be the Philistines, but they really just kind of get put down by Joshua, and then they rise up a little bit after that, and then they basically get subdued by Shagmar. That's going to be the next guy. And then at the end, that's going to be early on in the 480 years, and at the end of the 480 years, they're going to rise up again. We're going to get into all that in detail, okay? So this, it says, the king of Moab is strengthened against them, and it says he gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel and possessed the city of palm trees. And the children of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them a deliverer, Ehud the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. Okay? So in other words, they're sending him their annual tribute. Basically, each year they have to give him, and it's probably money or grain or whatever it is that they're called to tribute. And by this time, they've got a lot of farms and stuff, so I would expect it to be some kind of produce, and then he's going to either sell that or give that to his people, and that's going to make him rich and powerful. Ehud is going to be probably a descendant. Remember how the Benjamites were knocked down to 600 men? But those men, this is a lot of these guys who were left-handed, okay? So that's why he's a left-handed dude. He says he made a dagger which had 2 edges of a cubit of length, and he did gird it under his raiment under his right thigh. In other words, he basically made a long dagger that he could hide under his thigh. So if they're patting him down on the outside, apparently they didn't go for the inside back then if they were patting you down. But it just says it was on his right thigh. And said he brought a present to the Eglon, the king of Moab, and Eglon was a very fat man. And when he made an end to offer the present, he sent away the people that bear the present, but he himself turned again from the quarries that were by Gilgal. I don't know what that means. From the quarries that were by Gilgal, and said, I have a secret errand unto thee, thy king. So I think this is like mine. So it sounds like they brought whatever they brought in wagons and stuff like that. And then he sent them back and then turned back and went to the king. And he says, I have a secret errand unto thee, king, O king, who said, keep silent. So in other words, he basically is saying, I got a secret message for you, king. Okay. Now, this could look like a guy who's informing. That's probably what he's trying to look like, because remember, the Benjamites were almost wiped out in Israel. So I'm sure the king of Moab realizes this, because you have the Moabites right here, you have the Judites right here, and you have the Benjamites right here. So they're pretty close to them. I'm sure they know that the Benjamites were almost entirely wiped out, okay? So the Benjamites obviously are looked at as like a minority. Remember, they said, cursed be anyone who gives their wife to a Benjamite, okay? So you probably have generations of people not giving their wives to the Benjamites, except for those men that they kidnapped. So the Benjamites are very isolated from the rest of Israel, okay? So when this Benjamite says, I've got a secret message for you, king, if anyone's going to inform on the other Israelites who are not paying tribute or plotting to overthrow the king or whatever, it's going to be a Benjamite. So of course he's like, yeah, well, they don't like these Benjamites. My enemy's enemy is my friend, right? And so he says, all that stood by him went out from him, and Ehud came to him, and he was sitting in the summer parlor, which he had for himself alone. And Ehud said, I have a message for God unto thee, and he rose out of his seat, and Ehud put forth his hand, and took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. So there's nothing super miraculous about this story here, but if you understand it in the context of what happened with Benjamin, it makes sense that the king was so gullible and let this guy come in there in secret. He basically just had a hidden dagger and just kills him, right? And that's all that happened. And then it says the haft also went out of the blade, and the fat closed on the blade, and he could not draw the dagger out of his belly, and the dirt, that's the poo, came out. Okay, in other words, his guts, that was coming out of the hole he made. And Ehud went forth unto the porch and shut the doors of the parlor on him and locked him. So whatever the king had, this would have been like a back porch area of his throne room. And he basically went out there, and they would have been able to go out there and have a private dinner or whatever it is. And so he closes the door behind him and leaves out that way. And so it's, looks like the king's just having a private conversation. When is it appropriate to go back in there and check on the king? So they said, when he had gone out, the servants came, and when they saw, they beheld the doors of the parlor were locked. And they said, surely the king covers his feet in the summer chamber. Covering his feet, apparently this means relieving himself. I don't know why he says covers his feet, but it's basically like he's probably going to the bathroom. Says he's relieving himself, and that could mean he's resting, could mean he's going to the bathroom. I'm not sure. He's only relieving himself in the cool room. That could be a room that's especially cool and shaded, and so that's where he's going. They're just not hearing from him, and then they tarried until they were ashamed. In other words, we were to check on him. And behold, I opened the doors of the parlor, and therefore they took a key and opened them, and behold, their lord was fallen down dead on the earth. And Ehud escaped while they tarried, and passed beyond the quarries, and escaped to Siriath. And it came to pass when he was come, he blew a trumpet in the mount of Ephraim. Remember, Ephraim is just north of Benjamin. And the children of Israel went down with him from the mount, and he before them. And he said unto them, follow after me. The Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. And they went down after him, and took the fords of Jordan toward Moab, and suffered not a man to pass over. So, I don't know what's going on with Reuben. Reuben must have been completely subdued here, because they're saying they took the fords of Jordan before Moab. Well, Jordan is north of Moab. What I would guess, the Reubenites seem to be just like cowboys, okay? And they don't really seem to establish much in terms of cities. They they obviously have towns there, but you don't hear about any big fortified cities in Reuben. And it seems like they're mostly like pastoral nomads within their lands, and they're cowboys. They just raise herds and cattle and stuff. And same thing with Gad. Probably less so Manasseh. You're gonna have this Gilead region, which seems kind of strong, but Gad and Reuben, remember, they want to stay over here because they have big flocks and herds, and it seems like this is just nice land for grazing. So obviously you would prefer lowlands and flatlands to mountainous territory if you're just going to be grazing cattle, because why have to climb a bunch of rocks that don't have grass on them, right? So more than likely, when Moab subdued Israel, they probably took this land right here, and you're going to see them fight over it later on, okay? And he said, and they slew Moab at that time about 10,000 men, all lusty, all men of valor, and there escaped not a man. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and they had rest 80 years, so that's 80 years. And after him was Shagmar, the son of Anath, which slew Philistines 600 men with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. So some of these things are going to be concurrent. That's how I make the math work, okay? So I think Shagmar is just concurrent. Again, it's saying after him, okay? Well, it doesn't mean after he died or after these 80 years are over. It's just after him. So Ehud, kills the king, and he wins this battle apparently after 18 years of servitude. And then it says after him, remember this is going to be down here, after him Shagmar is going to kill 600 Philistines with an ox goad. Now, I don't see how killing 600 Philistines with an ox goad is delivering them from Israel, but remember, they were keeping Israel kind of oppressed. Let's see here. They were kind of keeping, basically to the point where the Danites couldn't really take any of their land. So apparently Ehud just goes kills 600 of them, and that kind of makes an impact. But again, if they're holding all these lands and all these cities and kind of building their strength back up, I don't see how he's delivering Israel by killing 600 men. But apparently it was a big deal. He killed 6 men without ox goad. An ox goad is almost like a spear, but it's basically like a pointy stick, which can have a metal end on it, that you're using to poke oxen into the right place. You don't have to poke them that hard. You don't have to stab them, but you're essentially poking them in the butt to keep them on track when you're plowing and stuff like that. So he's basically awesome with his ox goad, apparently. And then the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. And this is how you can tell that Shagmar is concurrent, okay? They did evil again when Ehud was dead. Now it says they had 80 years without servitude. But I would assume, remember, they have 18 years of serving that guy. I would assume that's not Ehud's whole life. Like, he's not an 18-year-old when he does this. Because otherwise he would be like, they start serving him when he was born, and at age 18 he kills them, and then 80 years. So I would assume they start doing evil after he dies, which is before that 80 years is over. But it doesn't catch up with him right away to get oppressed. And it says, the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Okay? So if you remember when they went to that final battle they had with Joshua against the Hittites and all these people in the north, Hazor was the main king, and they razed that city to the ground. However, it's been between 100 and 150 years since then, and it's apparently been rebuilt. If you read about early in the book of Judges, it talks about how they didn't kick out the Canaanites who dwelled in Megiddo and these lands down here. So basically, like these lands north around the Sea of Galilee, you're always going to have Gentiles here, even to the time of Christ, okay? And so they kick these guys, they put these guys to tribute instead of kicking them out, okay? These are going to be the lands of Zebulun and Naphtali. That's why they call it Galilee of the Gentiles. And they put them to tribute instead of kicking them out. And so Hazor is able to rise up after about 150 years. So they've wiped out the major armies of the region, but in a century you can build back up your manpower, and you can eventually make a comeback. So they're not far from Tyre and Sidon, so they can import weapons and things like that. And so this King Jabin of Canaan, he's apparently a remaining king of the Canaanites, and you're going to see Canaan, remember, as the father of all these families. So this could be an Amorite king, or it could just be like a descendant of a younger son of Canaan after his 9 tribes were broken out into separate nations, okay? So he reigns in Hazor. He had a captain of his host that's named is Sisera, and remember that some of these guys have iron chariots too. And he said, which dwelt in Harosheth of the Gentiles, okay? Notice it says of the Gentiles, okay? So this Galilee region, it was known to continually contain Canaanites and other tribes, and that's why it's called of the Gentiles, okay? So the children of Israel cried to the Lord, and they had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. Now, I don't understand how this guy is able to build up a force of 900 chariots of iron without the Israelites doing anything about it. But my guess is, remember, they're going to be oppressed for some time by this Cushan guy, and then they're going to be repressed by the Moabites. And it's probably during this time that these guys are slowly building up their forces, because if this Cushan guy comes in, he's coming in from the north, he's oppressing Israel sometime, and that's allowing them to build back up their forces. And my guess would be that guy was setting them up as kind of like a tributary / enforcer of the region, just like the Israelites did, or just like the Egyptians did with the Philistines. And so you've got this region just north of them, which is going to be the Mitanni kingdom. And that Mitanni kingdom also seems to be somewhat oppressed by the Kassite Empire. So if you look at the Kassite dynasty, it's going to control all this down here. You see Assyria's right here, it's not really growing, and the Mitanni region is going to be right here. So somehow these guys get around the Mitanni region, and I don't know if they have alliances with them. It doesn't really say. It just says that they were limited. So you would have the Mitanni here. The Assyrians are just starting to grow right here. This Kassite kingdom is down here, pretty much in Old Babylon, and then the Hittites are still to the right. And The Hittites are in decline during this time, and so the Mitanni are probably pretty strong, but the Mitanni are not really an advancing power. They're more like, it's called, Mitanni means United Kingdom, and it's more like a trade confederacy that basically has rule, and it looks like they just trade with everyone around them, and they're strong enough not for somebody else to just come in and easily conquer them, okay? So probably he has peace with them, and he goes over there and tries to take over, and my guess would be, because since Hazor is kind of the next big city to the north there, right above Megiddo, is that he's strengthening them to kind of be his garrison in the region, okay? And so that's what seems to be. But again, it's been, even since then, it's been like 100 years. So that might not be the case. They might have just slowly built up. They might have just had alliances with Mitanni and slowly built up their chariot forces over then, without Israel really taking note, okay? But anyways, they get to the point where they have chariots of iron, and it says, for 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. And Deborah the prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time. Now, Deborah is the only female judge, but she's also the only prophet listed in the whole book. I mean, you could say Gideon's a prophet because he has an encounter with the Lord, and Samson's mom and dad have an encounter with the Lord, but they're not really prophets. You don't really have anyone speaking the word of the Lord over people, okay? So Deborah seems to be the only prophet this whole time. Again, there's nothing unscriptural about female prophets, okay? And while it says she judged Israel at that time, it more means like she's giving the word of the Lord in terms of probably settling disputes and stuff like that. And obviously she's going to give the word of the Lord for Gideon to go in and lead. But in terms of the actual leadership of Israel, you can tell that it's appointed to Gideon, not her. And then Gideon kind of, because she's known to be a prophet, Gideon's kind of deferring to her because he apparently lacks, not Gideon, but Barak, because he lacks confidence or whatever, and he's kind of deferring to her because she's got this reputation, and she kind of shames him for it. So you want to understand that, because people are going to use this to be like, oh, women can be pastors, and it's like, it has nothing to do with women being pastors, okay? It has nothing to do with this. It's a woman who has a prophetic gift, just like Huldah has a prophetic gift, and she's clearly appointing a man to lead. Okay? So anyways, it says, and Deborah the prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time, and she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Okay? Now, I don't know if this is the same, because if you remember, Rebecca has a nurse named Deborah. And where she dies, they bury her under an oak. So I don't think it's the same thing. It's called the Oak of Weeping. This is Rebecca's nurse. So this is, remember, Isaac and Rebecca. That's where his nurse died, and she was significant. So I don't think this is the same thing. The Oak of Deborah and the Palm of Deborah, and this palm tree might just be named after her. Okay, so it was a famous palm tree in Israel where Deborah used to sit under it and give the word of the Lord to people, okay? And then, and it says, she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali. So he's apparently a Naphthalite. And if you look at where Hazor is right here, Naphtali's right in that territory. So here's Issachar, here's Zebulun, here's Naphtali. He's right in the territory of this king of Canaan, okay? And he says, and she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam. Now, if we look at Barack Obama, he's not really mentioned in terms of any of the genealogies. And neither is Abinoam, okay? So whoever these guys are, the reason, if you don't see them in Chronicles or anything like that afterwards, what that means is that none of their descendants come back and rejoin Israel after the captivity, okay? That's all that means, okay? Doesn't mean they die out necessarily. They could have stayed in Babylon or Assyria or wherever they were deported, and they just never came back, okay? In order to be in the book of Chronicles, they would have had to have descendants that came back to the land and brought their family records with them to prove that they had an inheritance in the land. And those are mostly going to be people from Judah, mostly Judah and Benjamin. Probably you're going to have some in Ephraim, but most of those people were deported out, and then their lands were given to foreigners. Okay. So she says to him, "Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw towards Mount Tabor, and take the 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and the children of Zebulun." So Mount Tabor is one of the high peaks in Israel, along with Mount Hermon, and that's where people believe that the Mount of Transfiguration was. Okay. So he says, draw towards Mount Tabor and take with the 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and the children of Zebulun. So grab 10,000 men right from here. This is a local conflict. And this is why I think this and what's going on with Gideon are both concurrent as well. I'm going to show you why. Because this is just going on up here. It's not, when you hear they oppress the children of Israel, it doesn't mean they're taking over and dominating all Israel. Like Moab is probably just dominating like Judah. And then Shagmar, it seems like the Philistines are kind of oppressing them over here. And so those two guys are delivering them down here. And then you have her delivering them up here. And then Gideon is going to deliver them down here too, okay? So that's why I think some of these things are concurrent, okay? I think they're all worshiping idols. And you're going to have this oppression come from the north, this oppression come from the south. But nobody seems to be oppressing all of Israel, like the whole land, okay? So it says, I will draw thee to the river Kishon, Sisera, the captain of Jamin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into your hand. And Barak said to her, if you will go with me, then I will go, but if you will not go with me, then I will not go. In other words, I don't feel strongly enough about myself that people will believe God is with me unless the prophetess goes with me, okay? It's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. It's basically showing a lack of faith on his part, okay? And she said, I will surely go with you, notwithstanding the journey that thou takest will not be for thine honor, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. So if you can't tell, that's a very clear rebuke, because he's lacking faith. He's saying, therefore, you're not going to get honor for this victory. A woman is going to get honor for it, okay? And in case you don't know, that's a shameful thing to them, okay? When you see guys saying, kill me so it doesn't look like a woman killed me, it's pretty bad to get killed by a woman, okay? In Middle Eastern culture all the way to today. So don't be a fembot and just try to make this something that it's not. It's very clear that God's choosing a man to lead, and Deborah is basically just the voice that God is using to choose that person. She's a woman anointed to prophecy, and there's nothing unscriptural about that in the Old or New Testament, okay? Women can prophesy. But there's a context when it comes to leadership, okay? Prophesying is not necessarily leadership, okay? You don't see many prophets who are also judges and rulers. You're going to have David, you're going to have Samuel, and that's pretty much it, okay? So then it says, Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali and Kadesh, and he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went with him. And Heber, the Kenite, who was of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses. So apparently, Hobab is another way of saying Jethro, okay? But Heber is a Kenite, and he is descended from the relatives of Moses. So remember, this is probably 150 years after Moses has died, at least. And so this is probably like 3 generations later. He said he had severed himself from the Kenites. So let's see about the Kenites. So for those of you who like the prayer of Jabez was a Kenite, okay? His prayer, if you want to just order up your whole life around this magical prayer that he made, and if you say this, you're going to get more money and wealth and whatever, that guy was a Kenite, okay? Also, the Rechabites, you're going to hear about them in the book of Jeremiah, as these people. I had a pastor that would always tell us about the Rechabites. They're these people who didn't drink wine because their father didn't want them to drink wine. And basically they're like, so you can listen to your father for all these generations, but the Israelites don't listen to God all these generations. That's pathetic, okay? Let's see. So there is a Canaanite tribe called the Kenites as well, okay? And that's where some people have thought that that Caleb was a Kenite. I've heard that before, but he's actually a Kenizzite, okay? And the Kenizzites are a Canaanite tribe too, but there's a descendant of Judah that is Kenaz, okay? And so he's a Kenizzite. The Kenites, people share names, okay? Remember, there's a Tower of Babel, so their names are going to be different by their tribes, but the Israelites are going to call them by what their names would be in Hebrew. And the Kenites that we're dealing with, it's very specific. These people are descendants of Moses' father-in-law. Remember, Moses' father-in-law is going to come with them, and it seems like one of his brothers-in-law is going to come with them, okay? So it says, it says, Hobab the father of Moses had severed himself from the Kenites, okay? Had severed himself from the Kenites. And pitched his tent in the plain of Zananim, which was by Kadesh, okay? So maybe he's saying that this guy was a Kenite of those Canaanite tribes, and he had severed himself from the Kenites and married in with the clan of Moses' father-in-law. And it says, because it's saying he was of the children of Hobab, and had severed himself from the Kenites. So that would be my guess, is somebody who's married in. He's a Canaanite who's married in with them. And he says, and they showed Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So apparently he's helping the Canaanites here, okay? And Sisera gathered together all his chariots, even 900 chariots of iron, and all the people that were with him from Harosheth of the Gentiles unto the river Kishon, okay? So the river Kishon is this river that is north of the Sea of Galilee, okay? And it says, and Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day that the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hands, and the Lord had gone out before thee. So Barak went down from him to Mount Tabor with the 10,000 men after him. And the Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his hosts with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and ran away on his feet. So we're going to learn about it later. The Lord's going to be helping them with rains and torrents, so their chariots are getting stuck. Okay, that's how he discomfits him. And so it's so bad that Sisera gets off his chariot and runs away. Okay, and Barak pursued after the chariots and after the hosts unto Harosheth of the Gentiles. So notice it keeps saying of the Gentiles. Galilee of the Gentiles, this is called, because they're just Gentiles here. And all the hosts of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword, and there was no man left. So they killed every last one in their army. Okay, so these chariots just got stuck in the mud, and that's how they won. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet into the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber, the Kenite. Okay, so the reason he trusts them is because the husband is a Kenite, and he's a Hebrew, and that husband was the one who informed on Barak gathering this army. Okay. But the wife is a descendant of Moses' father-in-law, okay? And so she's got mixed loyalties here, apparently. And it says, for there was peace between Jabin and the king of Hazor in the house of Heber the Kenite, okay? So this guy had married in with Moses' father-in-law, but he's a Canaanite. And that's why the Canaanite king has peace with them, okay? And so it says, Jael went out to meet Sisera and said unto him, turn in, my lord, turn to me, fear not. And when he had turned into her in the tent, she covered him with a mantle. And he said unto her, give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. She's just being all sweet, like motherly, and here, have some milk and take a nap. And he said to her, stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be, when any man does come and inquire me, I'll say, is there any man here? And that you shall say no. And she's like, I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. And Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail over the tent and took a hammer in her hand and went softly unto him. Okay? She's killing him softly. And she just gently comes up to him and let me adjust your pillow. And she smote that nail into his temples and fastened him to the ground. Shapap. One good pop, right? For he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, come, I'll show you the man who you seekest. He's like, I'll tell him no one's here. What I really mean is I will tell him right where you are after I kill you. Okay? And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the nail was in his temples. And he's like, oh man, I was going to get the glory for that victory, but a woman got the glory, just like a woman prophesied to me. Maybe I should promote male leadership instead of following women around like Adam did. Okay? So God subdued that day Jabin the king of Canaan before the children of Israel, and the hand of the children of Israel prospered and prevailed against Jabin the king of Canaan until they destroyed Jabin the king of Canaan. Okay, so he takes out his main general, his big chariot force that they were so scared of. Now, they did have some chariots of iron right when they go into the land, because it talks about them not being to displace them, but they put them to tribute. Okay. Now, I don't know how that goes down. Why are they serving them in the tribute if they're not able to dislodge them with their chariots of iron? And my guess would be because when Hazor gets burned in the first place and all these bigger armies get defeated, these guys probably sue for peace or something like that and make a deal. Okay, and then it says the hand of the children of Israel prospered, and they prevailed against Jabin the king of Canaan until they destroyed Jabin the king of Canaan. Okay, so these Canaanites who are down here, this is going to be like the last sovereign entity of Canaanites that really rises up again. Okay, if you pay attention to this whole thing, most of their attacks are going to come from outside. It's going to be the Philistines, the Midianites, the Amalekites, but this is going to be the end for the Canaanites in the land. Okay, the rest are just going to come from the outskirts. So then sang Deborah and Barak the son of Abinoam on that day, saying, "Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel, when the people willingly offered themselves. Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. I, even I, will sing unto the Lord. I will sing praise to the God of Israel. Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, and when thou marched out in the field of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens dropped, and the clouds also dripped with water. The mountains melted from before the Lord, even that Sinai from before the Lord, the God of Israel." So even as like in Sinai, okay? So this is something you're going to keep hearing come up, okay? This is in Deuteronomy 31. It talks about the Lord coming with 10,000s of his saints, okay? The book of Enoch is going to rip this off. And it's saying he came from Seir, and he's saying the heavens trembled, the heavens dropped, the clouds dripped with water, the mountains melted before the Lord, even that of Sinai before the Lord God of Israel. So if you hear about this whole Ron Wyatt going to Sinai thing, it's apparently melted on the outside, okay? It's burned on the outside, okay? And it says, "In the days of Shagmar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased and travelers kept the byways." Okay? So apparently Shagmar is also living during this time. Okay? So this is why it's going to say, after him Shagmar came up, and apparently these things are going to be concurrent. Okay? "The peasantry ceased in Israel, they ceased until you arose." "Deborah arose as a mother in Israel when new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among the 40,000 of Israel?" In other words, where are their armies? They suck because they picked up other gods, okay? "My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord," okay? Because she called for Naphtali and Zebulun, but apparently other people contributed, okay? And he says, "Tell of it, you who ride on tawny asses, and you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk by the way, to the sound of musicians at the watering places. There they repeat the triumphs of the Lord, the triumphs of his peasantry in Israel. Then down to the gates march the people of the Lord. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam." Now remember, when they first got the land, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Judah got all the best chunks, okay? And these other nations were kind of within their chunks. See how you see Manasseh on both sides almost surrounding Zebulun and Naphtali and these guys, and Ephraim's up here in the highlands, and Ephraim and Judah are surrounding Dan and Benjamin. These bigger tribes were supposed to kind of look out for the smaller tribes, so why aren't they, okay? And it says, "Then marched down the remnant of the noble, the people of the Lord marched down for him against the mighty. From Ephraim they sent out thither into the valley, following you, Benjamin, with your kinsmen," okay? So apparently the Benjamites have repopulated somewhat. It says, "From Machir marched down the commanders, and from Zebulun those who bear the martial staff. Okay, so Machir, if you remember, Gilead is descended from Machir. So these Manassites over here are sending people. It said Ephraim sending people, Benjamin sending people, Zebulun sending people. So all these surrounding nations are sending people, but who's missing? Asher and Dan. Okay, why? Because they're sea raiders by this time. Okay, so it says the princes of Issachar came to Deborah. Okay, so here's Issachar right here. And Issachar, faithful to Barak in the valley that rushed for his heels. Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Why? We'll think about it. Okay, we got our own problems here with the Moabites, and we're mostly just being cowboys and sheep herders. Okay, why did you tarry among the sheepfolds in hearing to hear the piping for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. In other words, they deliberated. They didn't. Let's take some counsel. Let's have a meeting, and we'll have a committee, okay? And they didn't actually show up and help. Gilead stayed behind the Jordan. So Machir is the father of Gilead, so he's got other descendants, but Gilead is not there, okay? And Dan, why did he abide in the ships? So the Danites, maybe by this time they have Joppa. It's not really clear on that, but they have Dan up here, and here's Asher right here. So Dan and Asher is mixing with Tyre and Sidon right here, and they're starting to sail with them, okay? Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, settling down by his own landings, okay? So they've got seaports by this time. Zebulun is the people that jeoparded their lives into the death. Naphtali, too, on the heights of the field. The kings then fought against the kings of Canaan at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo, and they got no spoils of silver. From heaven fought the stars, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away, the onrushing torrent, the torrent Kishon. So remember, this is right here. This torrent Kishon, apparently Mount Tabor. Let's see where Mount Tabor is. So Kishon is up here. Mount Tabor is south of there, but they're saying apparently this river flooded right here and caused all kinds of mud and swept them away, okay? The onrushing torrent, the torrent Kishon, march on, my soul, with might. Then loud beat the horses' hoofs and galloping on his steeds. Cause morose, says the angel of the Lord. Curse morose, says the angel of the Lord. Curse bitterly its inhabitants, because they came not out to help the Lord against the mighty, okay? So where is morose? So morose is apparently right at Mount Tabor. Okay, and so this is where these armies were gathering, but apparently the city that was there didn't come out to help. So he's saying, curse that city, says the angel of the Lord. Curse bitterly its inhabitants, because they came not to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Okay, so the Lord's fighting with them. Remember, the Lord is fighting all their battles for them when they first come in there. After that, because they won't clear out the land the way he told them to, he stops clearing them out for them, and he basically says, okay, you're going to learn how to fight. And they still won't fight, okay? And so he curses them. He says, most blessed of women is Jael. Now, the only woman he calls most blessed of women outside of this is Mary, okay? Most blessed of women. But I just wanted to show you this because it's not some sacred title, which means, well, clearly she's most blessed, so that means she's sinless. And she is going to be a co-intercessor with Jesus. She's going to help Jesus save us from our sins. No, she does help Jesus kill a general once in a while, okay? The wife of Heber the Kenite, the tent-dwelling woman, most blessed, okay? She asked water, and he asked water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a lordly bowl. She put her hand on the tent peg to the right hand of the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera a blow. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. He sank. He fell. He lay at her feet. In her feet he sank. This is funny when she talks crap. Watch this. This is Deborah's like diss track. Okay, watch this. Where he sank, there he fell dead. Listen to this. This is like a woman on woman rep battle. Okay, watch her diss track. Out of the window she pierced. The mother of Sisera gazed in the lattice. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariot? Where's my lad? Why isn't he back yet? Her wisest ladies make her answer. Nay, she gives answer for herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil? They must be just busy with all their plunder, right? Like dividing it, right? A maiden or two for every man. Spoil of dyed stuffs for Siphrah. Spoil of dyed stuffs embroidered. 2 pieces of dyed work embroidered for my neck and spoil. She's like, his mama, yo mama is back believing that you guys are so busy dividing the spoil, all the virgins you stole, all the embroidery, all the nice stuff you stole. And she's fooled because you're dead. So perish all thine enemies, O Lord, but thy friends be like the sun as he rises in might, and the land had rest for 40 years. Okay? So, notice how the land has rest for 40 years. Notice how they talk about Shagmar before that, in the days of Shagmar and the days of Jael. Okay? So Shagmar is probably in this latter 80-year period, okay? And he's concurrent because he's still alive, apparently, and Jael's alive when they're clearing out the highways because these chariots are running around kind of blocking and prohibiting everything and basically oppressing everybody, okay? So Barak, it says they have rest 40 years, and you're going to see Gideon is taken on the south while they're taken on the north, and that 40 years of rest seems to be the same 40 years, okay? So we're going to take a little aside here, and we're going to talk about the sea peoples, okay? So remember, we see Dan and Asher, okay, are nowhere named in this, okay? Now, the reason they don't name Judah is because down in the south, Gideon is fighting the Midianites, okay? That's why they don't bring up the fact, like, where's Judah? Why didn't Judah help? They talk about Ephraimites coming. They talk about all the tribes coming except for Judah, because Judah's doing stuff with Gideon and them, okay? And then also with Asher and Dan, okay? So where's Asher and Dan? And the answer is, remember, they go into the land around, it's 1490 BC when they come out of Egypt, okay? Which means it's around 1450 BC when they go into the Promised Land. So now we're 150 years after that, okay? So we're talking about 1300s to 1200s, okay? We're probably within 150, 200 years of this now, okay? So you have the time after Joshua. You're going to have 98 years there, plus 106, 146 years, and then whatever goes on, that 20 years of that. Okay, so 160 years, and then they're going to have 40 years apiece. Okay, so whatever that is, plus Joshua's 20 years, you're looking at somewhere around 180 years after they go into the Promised Land. Okay. So I just want you to, this is why it's so great when you do timelines, because history always matches it up, okay? So 180 years minus 1,250 years, we're looking at, I'm sorry, 1450 minus 180. And you're looking at 1270, okay? That's what year it is, okay? Now here's the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples were a group of tribes hypothesized to attack Egypt and other Mediterranean regions around 1200 BC, okay? This is when they get sailing, and once they get sailing, they're plundering, okay? They basically become pirate raiders, okay? Now remember, if you study the Hyksos, you find out the Hyksos from Avaris were the ones who got Egypt into seafaring, and they were the reason the Egyptians basically took over Cyprus and Crete, okay? So the Danites are probably involved with this, and the Asherites are probably involved with this. Okay, there might be other Israelites involved with this, but these guys probably have seafaring prowess before them. Then, when they get their lots of land, you're going to have the Danites and the Asherites right on the coastline. Okay, and they're surrounding the lands that Tyre and Sidon are, and Tyre and Sidon are basically the Canaanites and the Trojans, I believe, that seem to be kind of dominating the sea trade. Remember, Troy's got their city there, and it's not going to be destroyed yet for a few hundred years, okay? So Troy's got their city there up in Anatolia. Because the Egyptians have oppressed Crete and Cyprus, most of the Greeks aren't really rising as major seafaring powers yet, okay? They're mostly, between Troy and between the Egyptians, they're mostly second class in terms of seafaring powers, okay? And then the Sidonians who are going to be Canaanites, they're going to be strong. And then Tyre seems to be a colony of Troy. Okay. So anyways, around 1200 BC, they have 1175 BC. Remember, I just took you to 1270. So within less than 100 years of this, they're going to be strong enough. These raiders are going to be strong enough to attack and pillage Egypt. Okay. They're also going to attack Hattusa, which is going to be, let's see. It looks like 1190 is when the capital of Hattusa, or the capital of the Hittites, falls. Okay, so they're going to attack Egypt. They're going to lose when they attack Egypt, but they're not just attacking; they're also migrating and looking to settle in. Okay, and about 20 years before this, they attack Hattusa, which is the capital of the Hittite Empire. Okay, so they're really taking them out. And it says, let's read about these people. It says the event happened in 1213 to 1203 BC. Okay, so that's 75 years after Deborah and Barak. So they're already seafaring in the days of Deborah and Barak. And it doesn't really talk about who all they are, but if you look at the names of who they are, they're the Denyon, and then the Ekwesh, and then the Shekelesh, and the Shurdan. Okay, that's probably Ashkelon. But you're gonna have different theories on who these people are, because it's not just Israelites who are doing this. You're gonna have from 1200 to 1210 to 1100, for about 100 years, the Egyptians are recording these people because they're having regular battles with them. Okay, and who you keep seeing among them is the Denyon and the Shurdan, and the Denyon and the Shurdan are probably Asher and Dan. Okay, the Tejeker is probably Tyre. And Tejeker probably has to do something with Trojans, or it could be the Teresh. Okay, the Peliset are Philistines. The Shekelesh is probably Ashkelon, which is a Philistine city. The Weshesh, some people think that might be Asher, and these could just be, because remember, these are foreigners recording who these people are. But it looks like you're going to have the Danites, the Philistines, Tyre, Asher, and Weshesh, and Shurdan. And some people think Shurdan might be the predecessors of Sardinia. Okay, Sardinia is going to be one of the major islands off of Greece. That seems a little bit of a stretch. These other people are believed to be coastal peoples off the southern coast of Turkey. So remember, Hattusa has fallen. Okay, Hattusa falls in this century. And so you probably are going to have other people joining them. But the Egyptians have these pictures of what these people look like who they're taking, okay? And that's a Philistine headdress. These are probably Danites and Asherites right here. Now, I don't know Egyptian hieroglyphics enough to read this and know which is which. I think it says, let's see. Later hieroglyphs lifted 4 to 8 were translated as Peliset, Tejeker, Shekelesh, Denyon, Weshesh. So let's see the 4 to 8. See 4, 5, 6. I say 2, 3, 4, 6, and I'm guessing 7, 8. Oh, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm not sure. It's not really clear who they are. But my guess would be, just based on their headdress and their haircuts, is these are probably Danites and Asherites. These are Philistines. Whoever's wearing the horned helmets, those are probably like Sidonians or something like that. And some of these guys, it's hard to tell where they come from. But they're different people groups, and among them are the Danites and the Asherites. So what it seems to be is they basically just ally with these other people and just start pirate raiding, okay? And that's why they're not available. And you're not going to hear about the Danites at all except for Samson, okay? You're not going to hear about the Asherites. You're not going to hear about these guys involvement with Israel in any of their wars. Now, by the time you get to the kingdom and David in this, remember, you're going to get to a point where you have a king now, and you're going to have physical repercussions if you don't join in the battle. It's not just a confederacy anymore, okay? And so you're going to see tribes from Asher and Dan contributing to the armies then, but they're much smaller than the armies that they had when they came into the land, okay? So these people, when we get to Samson, we'll try to study this in more detail. I'm going to study this more for my book, A Serpent by the Way, so I know this well, because I believe Samson is going to fit very nicely into this era where Crete gets overthrown by Zeus. So basically the Caphtorim, or the Egyptian / Philistine people that are running Crete, get overthrown by Zeus. And Hercules comes in, and he's a son of Zeus. He's saying a half son of Zeus, which is probably a son-in-law of Zeus. And then he's going to father, it looks like, the Spartans and the Argives. Okay, so those are the Argonauts, which are basically going to be sailing warrior peoples who go on adventures, and then the Spartans, who are very strong warriors. And those guys are going to all get together and overthrow Troy. Okay, so it looks like Samson kind of sets that up. So that's what's going on with Dan and Asher. Again, remember Asher, in the whole book of Kings, Asher is mentioned. One son of Asher is mentioned. In the book of Chronicles, you do have some Asherites mentioned. Some Asherites apparently stayed with Judah, and they're still there after the fact. And then they're mentioned in Ezekiel. So Dan and Asher don't really have much play in Israel after that. They seem to become the seafarers and the Greeks. Probably the Asherites stay more because they've got a bigger chunk of land in Israel. They probably stay more in Israel, but they're definitely more involved with seafaring and sea trade than anything, okay? So they all perish, and the land had rest for 40 years. So you see all the tribes of northern Israel, except for Dan and Asher, are involved in this. And they specifically get called out. Judah does not get called out because they have their own problems with the Midianites. Okay, and so it's understood that Judah is not helping them because Judah is helping Gideon right now. Okay, so it says the people did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them the hand of Midian 7 years. Okay, so think of these as like, notice it's not saying after that. Okay, whoever is compiling this is very careful to say after this, after he died, right? When you just see something like this where it says the people of Israel did evil, these are two different tribal records, okay? And Samuel, it's probably Samuel putting them together. It gets finalized after the captivity of northern Israel, at least, because it talks about Dan and Benjamin and all these stories. And with the story of Dan, it says until the captivity, okay? So whoever finalizes it does it for the captivity, but you're probably seeing the initial finalization of this under Samuel. And then the latter finalization of this, you're probably seeing either under some priest or one of the prophets like Jeremiah or something like that, or Isaiah or somebody, okay? So anyways, it says the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years, and the hand of Midian prevailed over Israel because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves dens which are in the mountains and caves and the strongholds. So all these caves and strongholds, which you hear about the Essenes and the guys at Masada and the Zealots and all these stuff hiding in, where they're hiding all the Qumran scrolls and all this stuff, they were carved out in these days so that these people could hide their food from the Midianites, so the Midianites didn't take all their food, okay? For whenever the Israelites put in seed, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come and attack them, okay? So this is going to be Judah, okay? And they would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the land as far as the neighborhood of Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, no sheep or ox or ass. For they would come up with their cattle and their tents, coming like locusts for a number, and they and their camels could not be counted, so that they wasted the land as they came in. So apparently these huge roving bands of Amalekites and Midianites, which are basically Arab roving hordes, are coming in and pillaging the land every so often, okay? And Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the people of Israel cried for help unto the Lord, okay? So think of this as mostly Judah, okay? They're probably not coming in with their camels and all this stuff into the highlands and into the mountains, so they're probably not making it to northern Israel. They might do a whole, circle around and go through all of it, but there are other competing forces in the land. They're probably mostly going through Judah. Let's see where we are here. Because the Amalekites are down here and the Edomites are all down here. So I doubt that they're going to risk war with Moab and Edom and these Canaanites and stuff like that by going all the way around. They're probably just mostly going around here, okay? And you're going to have a lot of grain fields and stuff like that down here. This is where a lot of their farming is going to take place, okay? So it says, and the people of Israel cried unto the Lord on account of the Midianites, and the Lord sent a prophet to the people of Israel, and he said to them, so I take that back. Deborah's not the only prophet. There's another prophet, but he's unnamed, okay? The Lord sent a prophet to the people of Israel, and he said to them, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage, and I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave them into your hand. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not reverence the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwelled, but you have not given heed to my advice, my voice. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak at Oprah Winfrey's house, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. So who's the Abiezrite? Jobash the Abiezrite, okay? Says the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, he blew his trumpet, and Abiezer was gathered after him. So Abiezer is his household family name. It says, and a lot was for the rest of the children of Manasseh by their families, for the children of Abiezer, the children of Helek, and the children of Azrael, the children of Shechem, the children of Hefer, children of Shemitah. So whoever this Abiezer is, he is from Manasseh, okay? Now remember, you have Manasseh in the north and Manasseh in the south. So Gideon here is a Manassite, but remember, the Manassites on the other side of the river, they are also, some of them are married in with Judites, okay? Makir, I forget how this works out. I've said it in past videos, but Makir is married in with the Judites, and he is married in with the Arameans. And so you're going to have some kind of linkage between them, and David is going to go chill among them in his days, okay? So So Jobash, or I'm sorry, so the oak of Ophrah, Winfrey, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. In other words, we're trying to hide this wine really fast before they get here to plunder it, okay? And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, pray, sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all this befallen us? And where are his wonderful deeds, which our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has cast us off and given us into the hand of Midian. So Gideon apparently is not worshiping idols, but people in his family are, okay? And the Lord turned to him and said, go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Let me see this might of yours. Yeah, sure might. Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian, and I hereby commission you. Okay, so he's like, you're a boss, dude. Go get him. He responded, but sir, how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. And the Lord said to him, I will be with you, and I will strike down the Midianites, every one of them. So apparently, he's of these Manassites here. You know, you didn't really hear about these Manassites here. I would assume they're involved. You did hear about Manassites from here, but not Gileadites, okay? Machirites. Machirites are here, but the Gileadites didn't come. These Manassites you didn't hear about, okay? So these are all lowlands, okay? So they are, does look like they're circling around and plundering, okay? So all these lowlands here, these are kind of highlands too. They're getting highlands. There's definitely a valley of Megiddo coming through here, but there's a lot of mountains around here. But Judah and Manasseh are mostly lowlands and farm fields. Judah is highlands here and then down here. And so what they're probably doing is sending around their massive numbers of camels and stuff, and they're plowing through and raiding and shooting bows and arrows and hacking people and then taking their stuff, okay? And they circle around and then they go back to the desert, and you can't really, how can you chase them into the desert? There's no water there, right? So that seems to be what goes down, and Gideon's going to do something about it. And so let's see where Ophrah is. So Ophrah is right here, south of the Sea of Galilee. So remember, Deborah and Barak and all of them are fighting up north of the Sea of Galilee, and it's mostly peoples around here. They're coming down and joining them, and they're fighting up here. Okay, Mount Tabor is actually where they fight. Oh, here's Tabor, just north of them, okay? So that's where they're gathering. He's from right here, and they're being oppressed by the south. So it does look like the Canaanites are oppressing the north, the Midianites are oppressing the south, basically, it looks like Gideon and Barak are both doing their thing around the same time, okay? That's my guess. That's my guess, at least, okay? So, he said to them, if I have found favor with you, then show me a sign that is you who speak with me. Do not depart from here until I come to you and bring you out a present and set it before you. And he said, I will stay until you return. So Gideon went to his house and prepared a kid and unleavened cakes. From an ephah of flour and meat he put in a basket and broth and put in the pot and put them under the oak and presented them. So this is a consistent thing with God. He likes snacks, okay? He makes everything. He doesn't need food, but he still likes to eat stuff, okay? Jesus eats stuff after his resurrection. He doesn't need food. It still tastes good. And the Lord keeps getting snacks from them, and he likes it. The angels of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on the rock and pour out the broth. And he did so. And the angel of the Lord reached out with the tip of his staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes. And the fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. And he's like, that's the Lord, because our Lord likes snacks. We know. He cannot resist a snack. Then Gideon perceived that it was the angel of the Lord. And Gideon said, help me, Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, peace be unto you, do not fear, and do not die. You shall not die. Okay? Then Gideon built an altar to the Lord, and he called it, the Lord is peace. To this day it still stands in Ophrah, which belongs to the Abiezerites. Okay? That night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull, the second bull, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that belongs to your father, and cut down the sacred pole that is beside it. Okay? So apparently there is a Baal and an Asherah pole. Okay? Remember how Asherah is the woman who started sleeping with angels to make Nephilim after this, okay? And so obviously she is reverenced among them because these Nephilim were among them. Og, king of Bashan, is in the north, okay? And he was supposedly somebody who's, you know, they were defending him against Nimrod when Nimrod was rising. Nimrod did defeat them in battle, but they're still there, okay? There's apparently not a lot of giants there, but they're there, and they're called Rephaim. The ones in the south in Judah and Hebron are called Anakim, okay? And Joshua's going to take most of them out. But because Asherah is noted as the queen mother who brought in the Nephilim, she is revered as a goddess, okay? She's sleeping with angels. She's like some kind of special lady. And her name in Sumerian means the mistress of the heavens. And Ashtra seems to be like star wife or something like that, or Ashtaroth, okay? So she's sleeping with stars, or she's sleeping with angels, okay? So you have the Asherah poles, and Asherah poles, you've heard these things on like Bishop Hislop and stuff like that these are phalluses. I've said that before. I don't think they are. I think they are poles that are, see, people mix like the legend of Osiris and this Canaanite stuff together, and I've repeated this because I've heard this stuff, and they come up with Asherah poles being phalluses like obelisks, okay? Doesn't seem to be. It seems to be, Asherah poles seem to be oak trees that basically they cut off the top of the tree and they carve the tree into a statue of Asherah. That seems to be what an Asherah pole is, okay? Baals are going to be graven images of Baal, who seems to be based on the Lord appearing in the storm to Job, okay? So those are the main two gods that they're going to worship in Canaan, because those things happened right around there, okay? So you have Baal and Asherah, okay? So pull down the altar of Baal and the sacred pole that is beside it. That's the Asherah pole, okay? So this one says grove that is beside it, okay? The word in Hebrew is Asherah, okay? The Asherah that is beside it, okay? So typically what you would have with these things, you would have these sacred groves. Let's see. And you'd have something like this. You basically have a grove, like a clearing. So let's say you'd have a woods, okay? And in this woods, you'd have like a park kind of thing, okay? And in that park, you would have one of these oaks that are carved like this to represent Asherah, okay? So it's like a tree, regular tree, only the tree is carved to look like this slutty broad, okay? And they're like, cut these things down, Baal. And they'd basically be these sacred groves. And then the Baal would be something that might be like in a temple type thing, okay? And a lot of these things might be in the high places. And apparently there was one in Ophrah, because Oprah Winfrey's like that. So he says, and build an altar to the Lord thy God upon the top of this rock in the ordered place, and take a second bullock, and offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the grove which thou shalt cut down. Okay? So in other words, cut down the Asherah pole in this grove that's around it. Okay? And you're going to use that for kindling. Okay? You're going to use that for kindling, and you're going to offer a bowl to the real God, and you're going to be like, Jehovah is the greatest. Okay? It's like the Hebrew version of Allah Akbar. Okay? And then he's going to say, then Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord said to him. And so it was, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, that he could not do it by day and he did not do it by night. Okay? Now this is important. The Midianites aren't making them worship these gods. Okay? They're worshiping these gods. The Midianites are oppressing them for how long? For 7 years, the Midianites are oppressing them, and they're still not tearing down their altars. They've had a prophet come to them telling them, this is why you're doing it. They're still not listening, okay? So I want you to see how stubborn they are. They're not just like, durr, like, why are we being oppressed by our enemies? They don't believe. And this is what happens when they don't believe. This is going to creep up in Egypt later. Oh, the flood didn't happen because of our wickedness. The flood just happens periodically, okay? And we're going to get into this when we get to my next one, and I talk about like fatalism and astrology and what the stuff that they're saying is, okay? They're going to say these things just happen. It's just fate, okay? It's just happening. It's not because of our sin, okay? This is what fatalistic determinism does, okay? And trust me, when you get around Calvinists and stuff like that, listen to what they say. I have been part of a church where a guy did something without consulting anybody, merged the church and destroyed 2 churches, okay? And afterwards, I talked to his niece, and I said, I don't think that was God's will to do this. And she literally says, it was God's will because it happened, okay? That's how Calvinists think. They're fatalists, okay? Well, this is how the Jews think. They're like, it just happens. There's nothing. There's no correlation between our worshiping these idols and these bad things happening. Why? They're faithless. They don't believe. They've even got a prophet telling them this is why this is happening, okay? We've been at this since the wilderness, okay? We're now 200 years deep in this stuff, and it's like every time you guys worship idols, God gets mad and your enemies triumph over you. Are you picking up a pattern yet? No, they're not. They're faithless, okay? And people are like this to this day. Things keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse in the world, and they're like, oh, it has nothing to do with the fact that we're turning men into women and like praising fornication everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the Western world, we are praising fornication, we're praising rebellion, we're praising violence, we're praising lying, we're praising theft, and that has nothing to do with the fact that our society is falling apart. No, it has everything to do with it, okay? And when we get destroyed by our enemies, and we will because God is just and he's not partial to America like that, he doesn't have a special covenant with us, then the real people of God, the prophets of God are going to say, this is why it happened. This is why you guys are going to be destroyed. And the false prophets are going to be like, oh, no, these things just happen periodically. It has nothing to do with that. Let's keep at doing what we're doing and go join the kings of the east and try to overthrow the Antichrist. Watch, it's going to happen, okay? So they said to one another, who has done this thing? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, hath done this thing. Then the men of the city said to Joash, bring out thy son that he may die, because he has cast down the altar of Baal. Remember, Baal is just a word that means the Lord, okay? Yahweh does not mean the Lord. It's a proper name. Adonai means the Lord, but Baal is the name of the Lord to Canaanites, okay? That's the word they use for the Lord, okay? So Baal is the Lord. Adonai is kind of an equivalent, okay? They both kind of mean Lord and Master, okay? He's cast down the altar of the Lord because it has cut down the grove that was by it, okay? And Joash said to all that stood by him, will you plead for Baal? Will you save him? Like, you cast down our sacred idol. And it's like, well, he's obviously not much of a god if he can't defend himself. Will you save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death while it is yet this morning. He's like, bring it. You want some? Come at me, brah. And he's like, if he be a god, let him plead for himself, because one has cast down his altar. So in other words, Gideon is saying to these people, F around and find out. I got time. That's what he's saying, because he's an X-Man. And therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal. They called him Jerubbaal. He's got a new name. Jerubbaal, saying, let Baal plead against him, because he has thrown down his altar, okay? That's why he called him Jerubbaal. He's the guy who's like, let's see what Jerubbaal means. Baal will contend. Baal will contend, or he contends with Baal, okay? So he's the guy who picked a fight with Baal. He's like, if Baal wants to bring some, he can bring some, okay? So he says, then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east were gathered together and went over and pitched in the valley of Jezreel. Now, just because Baal is originally based on the Lord showing up in the storm for Job, does not mean they're okay to make up altars of Baal. Remember, by this time, the reason the Baal is with the Asherah, okay, is because they're mixing Baal with the bull of heaven, okay? And they're making those two the same and saying that's the one who impregnated Asherah to make the Nephilim, okay? So when you see Baal and Asherah together, okay, you need to understand they have just taken the Lord of the Storm from Job, merged it with the bull of heaven who impregnated Asherah, and that's Baal, okay? So Baal is a different god. He is a merging, and you're going to do the same thing with Ishtar and the Holy Spirit. Remember, the Holy Spirit is a feminine throughout the Old Testament, okay? So they're going to mix the Holy Spirit, who's like a mother and a wisdom figure, and they're going to merge that with Inanna or Ishtar, who's a whore, okay? And so they convert the Holy Spirit into the harlot, and they convert the Lord into the bull of heaven, or the beast, okay? And that's why you're going to see this. The bull is usually representing the beast, okay? That's why the Israelites worship an image of the beast at Mount Sinai. So the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and Abiathar was gathered after him. So in other words, the clan of the Abiezrites, that's his forefather, was gathered against him. And he sent all the messengers throughout Manasseh, who was gathered unto him. I need to look into this Abiezer guy more so we understand who we're dealing with, okay? So Abiezer is a family of Manasseh. He's the first family listed, which means he's probably the firstborn. It says Manasseh by their families, children of Abiezer, Helek, Azriel, Shechem, Shepher, Shemitah. The only other Abiezers listed are Benjamites, so that's pretty much all we know about these guys, okay? So Abiezer seems to be one of the leading families of the Manassites, outside of Machir and the Gileadites and those guys. And he says they were gathered unto him, and he also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came up to meet them, okay? So apparently they are getting these three, okay? Now remember, those guys would have been around this time, probably fighting the Deborah and Barak battle, okay? But they're not exactly concurrent, okay? But it's around this time. And Gideon said unto God, if thou wilt save Israel by my hand, and thou hast said, as thou hast said, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the floor, and dew will be in the fleece only, and dry in the earth beside, then shall I know that thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast said. And it was so. And he rose up early in the morning and thrust the fleece together and wringed out the dew from the fleece in a bowl full of water. And Gideon said to Guy, let not thine anger against me, like he's double testing the Lord. Okay, what he's just wants to make sure he's going forth in the strength of the Lord, not his own strength. The Lord allows it. Okay, but I will speak this once. Let me prove, I pray thee, but this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry in the fleece, and upon all the ground let there be dew. And God did so that night, for it was dry in the fleece only, and there was dew on the ground. So when you think God's trying to tell you to do something, okay, it's okay to test it out. It's very okay to test it out, okay? Like, I think God wants me to give money to this person. Okay, well, sit on it. I literally just had this happen in the past week. Maybe I should give money to this person in need, praying about it. There's reasons I have doubts. Maybe I should. And literally, by the time I went to go do it, somebody else had already covered the need, okay? 100%, so I couldn't even do it, okay? Just because I took some time to pray on it, just took some time to test that feeling. Is that coming from your own heart? Because you can do for the poor as often as you will, but is that something that God wants you to do, or is that wise to do, okay? By the time I went to go give, the need was covered, okay? So those things will happen, okay? Now, Jeroboam, who was Gideon, and all the people that were with him, rose up early and pitched beside the well of Harod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them by the hill of Morah in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for thee to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand has saved me. So it doesn't say how many are with them, but he's basically like, this is too many. I want to make a show of this, okay? Now, therefore, go and proclaim in the ears of the people, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. So this is where they are, apparently, when they're getting ready to fight, okay? So they have crossed the river, and they're over here in Mount Gilead, okay? So they've gotten all these people from these guys. Remember, these guys fought up in here, okay? Now they're going over here because they know these guys are going to be circling around. They're going to do this, and they're nomadic people. So they're going to dwell on the outskirts of these lands and just keep going around, round, round. The herds are going to come through. They're probably going to sell some wool and stuff like that. They're probably going to do some trading, but they're mostly going to do some raiding and pillaging, okay? So he said he returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000. So apparently they had 32,000 people altogether, okay? 22,000 left, there remained 10,000. So this is a good troop here. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down into the water and try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom you say to thee, this shall go with thee, and the same shall go with thee. And whomsoever I say to thee, this shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. So he brought down the people to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone that laps water with his tongue as a dog laps shall be set by himself, okay? So this is somebody who's going to be scooping up water and going, okay? And he said, everyone that bows down, and likewise everyone that bows down on his knees to drink, okay? These are the guys who just bend down and just drink right out of the faucet, okay? I used to drink out of the faucet as a kid, I used to do that, okay, all the time. And then those who scoop in their hands, And there's no reason why he picked some over the others. You're going to read little children's books and stuff that act like these people were more vigilant. And no. It's just arbitrary. He's just looking for the smallest number, okay? And he says, the Lord said to them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, were 300 men, but all the rest of the people bowed down their water to drink. It's just more efficient. Just stick your face right in the river and just get at it, right? But some were just like, and they took their time, and there are less of them. So he said, the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and deliver the Midianites into your hand, and let all the other people go his man to his place. Now remember, Abraham had 318 people when he defeated the armies of Nimrod. Why? Because he pounced on them at night. They had no fear. They surprised them, and they just got to killing. And by the time these people are waking up from their sleep and trying to figure out who the good guys and the bad guys are, they're stabbing the guy next to him. And that guy was on their team. But they didn't know this because they'd just been spoils of war and pillaging and all this stuff, okay? They're drunk. They're probably sleeping with all the women they've taken and conquered, right? And they're just drunk. And they're just like, okay, we won. And they're not expecting 300 guys to just run up on their 10,000, just like stab, 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 stab. How many did you get? I got 48 of them. All right, awesome, right? They're not expecting this. So the people took their victuals in their hands and their trumpets, and they sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, and retained those 300 men, and the host of Midian was beneath them in the valley. And it came to pass that night that the Lord said to him, arise, get thee down in the host, for I have delivered it into thine hand. But if thou shalt fear to go down, go thou with Purah, thy servant of the host. And thou shalt hear what they say, and afterward shall thine hands be strengthened and go down in the host. Then went he down with Purah, the servant, unto the outside of the armed men that were in the host. So they're actually going to spy out this camp, okay? He's going to just wander up to them. Why? Because these people are probably trading with outsiders and stuff. They're not suspecting two people, okay? And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay along in the valley like grasshoppers for a multitude. So there's a ton of them in this valley. And the camels were without number as the sand by the sea for a multitude. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream to his fellow and said, behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian and came into the tent and smote it, and it fell, and it overturned in the tent and lay along. In other words, a cake of barley bread just rolls down, hits the tent pole, and the tent all falls flat. And his fellow servant said, this is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the man of Israel. So they know this Gideon's coming for them. They know this Gideon. For into his hand has God delivered Midian and all the hosts. So apparently these guys know they're getting prophetic dreams. They know this is coming. This is crazy. And it was so that Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped and returned to the host of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has delivered in your hand the host of Midian. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, and empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. And he said unto them, look on me, and do likewise, and behold, when I come to the outside of the camp, it shall be that as I do, you shall do. So they're basically taking these clay pots, okay, and they're putting torches in the clay pots, but they're holding them in such a way that it's not shining light all around, okay? It's probably just in the pot, right? And it says, when I blow the trumpet, I and all that are with me, when you blow the trumpets also on every side of the camp, say the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And so Gideon and the 300 men that were with him came to the outside of the camp in the beginning and the middle of the watch, and they had a newly set the watch, okay? So this is the beginning of the middle watch. There's 4 watches in the nights, okay? So typically there's going to be 3 dark watches once it gets dark, and then the 4th watch, that's when the sun's going to rise. So the middle one, we're talking your midnight to 3, okay? They just set the watch, okay? So it's midnight. These people are tired. They've been running around all day. They're laying down. They probably got some plunder and pillage. And they had just newly set the watch, and when they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands, so whoever's in the last watch is tired. Okay, time to go to sleep. All right, wake up. It's your turn to watch. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers and held the lamps in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands and blew withal, and they cried, the sword of the Lord of Gideon. So all of a sudden you got trumpets blowing, you have light everywhere. You're like, holy crap, this army's huge. we're toast. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. And the 300 blew the trumpets of the Lord, set every man's sword against his fellow, and even throughout the host. And the host fled to Bethshittah and Zerath to the border of Abel Meholah and Tabbath. Okay? So they didn't even kill him. They just blew the horns and showed off their torches, and people were like, ah, and they ran away in the night. Okay? And the men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali and out of Asher and out of all Manasseh and pursued the Midianites. So I take that back about the Asherites not being involved. It's just the Danites who are not involved. The Asherites did say they laid in their ports, but they were involved in this fight, okay? The Naphtalites were involved in both fights, and Manasseh seems to have just been involved in this fight. Judah's still not involved. I don't know what's going on with Judah here. They must have their own thing going on in the south, okay? And Gideon sent messengers throughout all of Mount Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites, and take before them the waters unto Beth-barah and Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together, and took the waters from Beth-barah and Jordan. And they took 2 princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb, and they slew Oreb upon the rock, and Zeb they slew upon the winepress. And Zeb pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon to the other side of Jordan. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, why hast you served us thus, and called us not? It says, and the men of Ephraim said to him, why have you served us thus, and called us not, when we were... Okay, let's see this. Why have you done this to us, and not called us when you went to fight the Midianites? And they upbraided them violently. In other words, they bawled them out for not calling them to fight. And he said to them, what have I done now in comparison to you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? In other words, don't you guys got better stuff than us already? God has given in your hand the captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison to you? When he said this, their anger has subsided. In other words, man, God has given them into your hands. Okay, that's, wow, yeah, that's impressive. He kind of gives them the glory for his victory to kind of calm them down. Then Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and his 300 who were with him, exhausted and famished. And they said to the people of Succoth. So if you remember, Succoth is where, like, I think Abraham and Jacob and stuff were hanging out for a while. It's on the other side of Shechem. And he said, please give some loaves of bread to my fellows, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. So apparently they came down to the river. It says that Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over. So apparently they tried to run into the land of Israel to get away. I'm not really understanding this, but that's what went down. And he said to the people of Succoth, please give some loaves of bread to my followers, for they are exhausted. I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. We've already killed 2. We've got 2 more to go. And the officials of Succoth said, do you already have your possessions in your possession, the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna, that we should give bread to your army? In other words, I don't see you killing these kings, and these guys are still coming to pillage our goods. That's what they think, okay? So unless you kill them, we're not going to help you, okay? And Gideon replied, well then, said the Lord, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will trample your flesh on the thorns of the wilderness and on briars. And from there he went up to Penuel and made the same request for them. And the people of Penuel answered him as the people of Succoth had answered. So the people of Penuel said, when I come back victorious, I will break down this tower. Okay. Now Penuel and Succoth are both right here. And why are they so like tentative to give bread? Because apparently they got bread stores and they know these Midianites are coming for it. And these guys are like, we're first. When they come around to do their thing, we're first. And if we don't have anything, we're dead. Okay? So they're exacting tribute of food from them. Okay? And so they're basically more scared of them than they are trusting in Gideon and trusting in the Lord. Okay? And so Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with their army, about 15,000 men, all that were left of the army of the people of the east, from 120,000 men bearing arms had 120,000 men bearing arms had fallen. They've apparently killed 120,000. So this is a massive, massive roving horde, okay? So Gideon went up by caravan route east of Nobah and Jogbadah and attacked the army. So where's Nobah? So he's gone all the way out here. So they've apparently gone out into the wilderness to try to escape, and he goes all the way out here to get them. Okay, he's like, no, we're not letting you guys just build back up and come back later. No, this is revenge. And Jogbahan attacked the army, for the army was off its guard. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and threw the army into a panic. And Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres. Now, I don't understand. They've got 15,000 men. He still seems like he's just got these 300 guys. Am I missing something? Okay, so it looks like after the initial battle, he's sending for everybody else, like, let's come get these guys, okay? So it does look like they're bringing bigger armies at that point. So Gideon went up by the caravan route east of Nobah and Jogbadah and attacked the army. So apparently this was a trade route that went all the way around to like Mesopotamia and that, and probably back down through Arabia. And this is where these guys were coming from, okay? And they knew that the Jews were weak, and they would just come in and just pillage them. And so Gideon went up the caravan trade route east of Nobah and Jogbadah and attacked the army, and the army was off its guard. In case you don't notice what this looks like, yes, Muhammad was doing this stuff in his day, okay? These roving trade guards, but this is a huge one. It's saying 120,000 men, okay? And Zebah and Zalmunna fled. He pursued them and took the two kings, Midian, Zebah, and Zalmunna, and threw the army into a panic. And Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres. He caught a young man, one of the people of Succoth, and questioned him, and listed for him the officials and elders of Succoth, 77 people. And he came to the people of Succoth and said, Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, Do you already have in your possession the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna? Why should we give bread to your troops who are exhausted? And he took the elders of the city, and he took the thorns of the wilderness, and the briars with them, and he trampled the people of Succoth, and he broke down the tower of Phanuel, and killed the men of that city. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, What about the men you killed at Tabor? They answered, As you are, so are they. Every one of them resembled the sons of a king. Okay? So apparently they killed a bunch of people at Tabor. And he replied, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother, as the Lord lives. If you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. So he said to Jether, his firstborn, Go kill them. And the boy did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, for he was still a boy. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, You come and kill us, for as a man is, so is his strength. So Gideon proceeded to kill Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescents that were on the necks of their camels. So the Muslims worship a moon god. They're not going to admit this, but they worship a moon god, okay? And so these crescent moons, they're hanging on the necks of their camels, because for the longest days they've worshipped a moon god. And I believe Allah just means, Allah means a god, okay? It seems to be derivative of Enlil, but it seems to be associated possibly with Lilith. There's definitely masculine and feminine versions of this, but the Arabs are just pretty ignorant. They're desert people. They're not literate. They're not scholars. These people are just going back and forth, collecting legends and myths from other people around them and mixing them together, and that's what they worship. And that's why by the time you get to Muhammad, they have this Kaaba house with all these different idols in it, because they're just traders that are going back and forth and collecting different idols and stuff of people around them, and they're just collecting them, okay? And then they eventually merge them all into Allah, essentially. Then the Israelites said to Gideon, Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us out of the hand of Midian. And Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. So they want to make Gideon king. And Gideon is like, nah, the Lord is king. Then Gideon said, Let me make a request of each of you. Each of you give me an earring that he has taken as booty. Remember, it's 120,000 people. They've got camel crescents around their neck, which are probably made of gold or something. And they're all wearing earrings. So he's like, each of you give me an earring. That's 120,000 golden earrings he's going to get. That's pretty good. For the enemy had golden earrings because they're Ishmaelites. Apparently that's their thing. So 120,000 gold earrings is going to make me plenty rich. So he's like, just each of you give me an earring that you've taken for booty. Okay? And we will willingly give them the answer. We will willingly give them, they answered, and they spread a garment, and each threw into it an earring that he had taken as booty. And the weight of the golden earrings requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. So let's see what a shekel of gold. $11.4 grams. Gram of gold is $78. $1.5 million. In current gold prices today, he's like, just give me $1.5 million and we'll call it a wrap. And apart from the crescents and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian and the collars that were worn on their necks of the camels. Okay, so apparently they got other stuff as well. Gideon made an ephod out of it and put it in his own town in Ophrah, and all of Israel prostituted themselves to it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So he made an ephod, and an ephod, remember, I don't know how he's doing this, but he's saying whatever he gets out of these garments and stuff, he makes an ephod, which is like a priestly skirt. Okay, it's meant to be a religious symbol representing Adam's loincloth that the Lord gave him. Okay, you still see things like this in Mormonism. You still see things like this in Freemasonry. So let's see. See this whole, it goes over their whole body, but it's meant to be this skirt, and it's meant to represent the loincloth of covering. Okay, that's the breastplate. That's not the ephod. But apparently he uses these gold in these garments to make this ephod, and the ephod turns into an idol. This is pretty bad. And to the Gideonites, okay? Even after this all started with him tearing down an idol. So Midian was subdued before the Israelites, and they lifted up their heads no more. So the land had rest 40 years from the days of Gideon. In other words, you see how they say they lifted up their heads no more. They never had a problem with the Midianites again after this, okay? This is what they would do. They'd take these people out, and never again would they step, okay? Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went on to live in his own house, so they had 40 days of rest in the days of Gideon, okay? So I am theorizing that the 40 years of Deborah and Barak and the 40 years of Gideon are concurrent. I could be wrong. Remember, you're going to have different calculations of this. I do this by shortening how long it counts Samuel ruling as a judge, and I'm trying to make this fit into the 480 years. Josephus says this period is 592 years, and so he could just be stacking all this plus the age of Joshua. It's not really clear, and I don't want to claim to have all the answers in it. This is just a way that seems to be able to work out. Okay. Then he says, Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went to live in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. His concubine, who was in Shechem, also bare him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Now remember the people of Shechem, who they took as servants way back in the day under Jacob, when they killed all the people of Shechem. Well, those people of Shechem seem to have either married in with the Manassites, or Manasseh also has a descendant named Shechem, but these Shechemites are going to be kind of outsiders of Israel, okay? Now, to be fair, Gideon has a concubine, and this Shechem is there, but he's going to be around these other Shechemites, okay? And it looks like this Shechemite concubine is probably like a woman who is of these, descended from these servants who came with Israel, okay? So this is why when you people are like, you're going to hear your college professor say, there's no way these Israelites, there's no way they could have possibly had 2 million people come out of Egypt, or the estimates could be as high as 3 to 4 million people, okay? But their army's like 600,000, okay? So when you have an army of like 600,000, you want to average these guys have a few kids each and at least triple that, okay? So you're going to have at least 2 million people, okay? But you need to remember, when they go into Israel, they're not just going into Israel with the 70 sons of Judah. They're going into Israel with the 70 sons of Judah, plus, remember, Abraham has 318 soldiers in his camp, okay? Which means these are trade soldiers from the men of his servants. Isaac is going to inherit all these servants, okay? And these servants are going to keep multiplying too, okay? So you have that, plus you have all the people of Shechem they took, okay? So when they go down into Israel, even though the sons of Israel and Judah are just 70, with all of their servants, remember, they're considered like lords and an aristocracy, and these servants are like their peasants, okay? They're going to be in the thousands when they go down into Egypt. And that's why, this is why your Egyptians, or your Egyptologists are going to say the Hyksos were not Hebrews. They're going to say there's a bunch of different tribes from Canaan who seem to be coming into Avaris. Well, the reason is because the Jews have all these other servants and their descendants who are probably, many of them, purchased from Canaan. And then you're going to have the Shechemites, who they killed, which are looks like they're like an Amorite tribe. Okay, so they're going to have all these Canaanite servants that are with them, and they're the aristocracy. These 70 are basically the lords, and these are going to be the peasants. Okay, and so that's how they get to the thousands. But they keep them separate. They don't necessarily. I mean, some of them they probably do marry, but it's not a common thing to marry one of your servants. Okay, you're always you're kind of keeping that servant status thing in place, and the whole world does this. You're not going to have a king marry a peasant. Okay, they're going to marry other people who are of means, are of wealth. They're not just like, oh, that girl's pretty, so I'm going to marry her, and now her kids are going to have a chunk of my inheritance. No, they're going to have concubines for them. And concubine literally just means he sleeps with her. That's what a concubine means, okay? So if that woman is good looking, I'll sleep with you, and maybe, here's some change, and a little favor for you, and, help you pay the bills and stuff like that. But you're not going to get a son who's getting some of my inheritance, because it's not going to go from the aristocracy to the peasants, okay? So so this is what's going on with Shechem. So these Shechemites apparently go back and they repopulate Shechem, okay? And Abimelech is going to be a son of Gideon through a concubine at Shechem. And Gideon, son of Joash, died in his good old age, and he was buried in the tomb of his father Joash at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites relapsed and prostituted themselves with the Baals, making Baal-berith their god. So they went right back to worshiping the Baals, okay? Well, remember, they've got the Shechemites among them who were, of the people that were worshiping Baal in the first place, they're all related to them. You have Canaanites still in the land, so you have some people that are married in with Canaanites, and you did have Canaanites of means because they put them to tribute, which means you had people, Canaanites, with lands and farms and estates and stuff like that, and you had people marrying in with them, okay? They're not just marrying girls because they're cute. They're marrying people who have access and privilege and munties and stuff like that, okay? So then he says, and they did not exhibit loyalty to the house of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he'd done for Israel. So the Israelites immediately went back to idolatry. Now here's what's going to happen with them after that, okay? They're not just going to get oppressed by an outsider, they're going to get impressed by a Shechemite, okay? The son of a concubine, a bastard. So Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's kinsfolk, okay? So his mother is of these Shechemites, and said to them and to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the hearing of all the lords of Shechem, which is better for you, that the 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Okay, remember, he is a descendant of Gideon, who all of Israel wanted to make king, okay? Because he takes out the Midianites, okay? Jael takes out the Canaanites, and who knows how close these times are, but Gideon takes out the Midianites, were these massive hordes of 120,000, okay? So 120,000 is much more than 900 chariots, okay? So he's a boss, and they want to make him king, and now his bastard son of his concubine, who is a Shechemite, who would basically be a Canaanite, okay, says, I'm his son, let me rule over you. And they said, okay, remember all that I am bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh. In other words, I'm one of y'all's. Okay? So his mother's kinfolk spoke all these words on behalf of the hearing of all the lords of Shechem, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, so they said, he is our brother. Okay? And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the temple of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. So in other words, these are thugs, these are outcasts, these are people, these are street kids, okay? And he went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers of Jerubbaal, 70 men, on one stone, but Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, survived, and he hid himself. Then all the lords of Shechem and Beth Millo came together, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar of Shechem. So they're declaring this guy king of Israel. He's related to Manasseh, and he's probably a Shechemite, probably part Canaanite, okay? And they said, when it was told to Jotham, he cried and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim. Mount Gerizim is going to be where the Samaritans later built a temple, okay? And he cried out aloud and said, listen to me, you lords of Shechem, and so that God may listen to you. The trees once went out to anoint the king over them, a king over themselves. So they said to the olive tree, reign over us. And the olive tree said, shall I stop producing my rich oil by which the gods and mortals are honored and go to sway over the trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, you come up and reign over us. But the fig tree answered them, shall I stop producing my sweetness and my delicious fruit and go and sway over the trees? Then the trees said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said, shall I stop producing my wine that cheers gods and mortals and go and sway over the trees? So the king said to the bramble, you come and rule over us, okay, the tumbleweed. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. This is ironic because the tumbleweed has no shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, if you have acted in good faith and honor, you have made Abimelech king, and you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his sons deserve, for my father fought for you and risked his life and rescued you from the hand of Midian. Okay? But you this day have risen against my father's house this day, and have killed his son, 70 men on one stone, and you have made Abimelech, the son of his slave woman, king over the lords of Shechem, because she is your kinsman, okay? His slave woman. Remember, the Shechemites were slaves to the Israelites, okay? And he just had her as a concubine. If I say that you have acted in good faith and honor with Jerubbaal and his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the lords of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from the lords of Shechem and Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. Okay? Now notice he says the lords. This says the men, the Baal, so lords. Remember, this is the Canaanite words as lords, okay? Remember, these Shechemites, who were, these would have been the women and children who they, when they killed all the people of Shechem, they took the women and children, okay? They lived among them for all these years, but they have elders of their clans too. And now that they moved back in the land, they're apparently right back in Shechem, okay? And so they have lords and elders among them. Remember, you're talking 400 years have passed, okay? So these people have quite a few people now, okay? That the cruelty done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech their brother, which slew them, and upon the men of Shechem, which aided him in killing his brethren. And the men of Shechem sent liers in wait for him at the top of the mountains, and they robbed all that came along that way by them, and it was told to Abimelech. So apparently, he has got them turning on each other, okay? So you have the Shechemites, and then you have Abimelech and his gang of thugs, okay? And Gaal, the son of Ebed, came to his brethren and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. And they went out into the fields and gathered their vineyards and trode the grapes and made merry and went to the house of their God and did eat and drink and cursed Abimelech. So these people are worshiping another god. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, who is Abimelech and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal and Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for why should we serve him? Okay, so notice this is Hamor, okay? Hamor is, if you remember, Abraham buys the tomb from Hamor, the father of Shechem, okay? And Hamor is going to basically be good to Abraham, but then the Shechemites are going to rape Dinah, and they're going to kill off all the Shechemites and take them all as slaves. Now they're back, and what these people are trying to do is revive the Shechemites in the name of their father Hamor, okay? In other words, why are we serving this guy who's half Gideonite, okay? So what you're seeing is these people saying, we're bringing back the glory of Shechem, okay? The son of Hamor. We're going back to our ancient ancestor, and we're following him. Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. In other words, not this half-breed, half-Manassite, half-Shechemite. We're full-blooded Shechemites. Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, okay? So he's turning them on him. Why? Because he uses the fact that he's the son of Gideon, who they wanted to make king, to exalt himself as king and saying, let's rule over all of Israel against Shechemites, okay? And the Shechemites turn on him and say, he's not one of us, really. He's just the bastard son of Gideon, okay? And so he said, and would to God this people who are under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, increase thine army and come out. So this is Gaal the son of Ebed. This is the Shechemite, okay? Full-blooded Shechemite. This is just ironic how full circle this has come. These are the descendants of the people who Simeon and Levi killed them all. Killed all their fathers, okay? They go way back because Hamor sold the tomb of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah to them, okay? These people go way back, but now we're dealing with them once and for all. And he says, when Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled. And he sent messengers to Abimelech privily, saying, behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brethren be come to Shechem, and behold, they fortify the city against thee. Now therefore up by night, thou and the people that is with thee, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be that in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, thou shalt rise early and set upon the city, and behold, when he and the people that is with him come out against thee, then mayest thou do to them as thou shalt find occasion. And Abimelech rose up, and the people that were with him by night, and they laid wait against Shechem in 4 companies. So now you've got the thugs, the thuggish army, the gang of Abimelech, basically, and the Shechemites turned on each other. Remember what the curse was of Gideon's youngest son, okay? He's basically saying, let the bramble consume you. In other words, you took a worthless person and made him king over you, so now let you guys consume each other, okay? He's cursing him, and he's saying, and Gaal the son of Ebed went out and stood in the entering of the gate of the city, and Abimelech rose up, and the people that were with him from lying in wait. And when Gaal slew the people, he said to Zebul, behold, there come people down from the top of the mountains. And Zebul said unto them, thou seest the shadow of the mountains as they were men, okay? So basically, the Shechemites are like, no, those are just shadows of the mountains. You think there are armies coming down. And Gaal spoke again and said, see, there come people down by the middle of the land in another company along the path by Minoim. Then Zebul said unto him, where is now thy mouth where thou said, who is Abimelech that thou shouldst serve him? In other words, you were talking a lot of crap before. Go get him. Is not this the people that you despise? Go out, I pray now, and fight with them. And Gaal went out before the men of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him and fled before him, and many were overthrown and wounded, even unto entering a gate. Now Abimelech is evil, but he's the son of Gideon, gosh darn it, and he is not going to let some Shechemites, who are the slaves of Israel, and they've been the slaves of Israel since before they went down into Egypt, okay, since the days of Jacob, not going to let them get all uppity and try to, like, overthrow him, okay, because he's the son of Gideon, gosh darn it. And apparently the rest of Israel is just chilling and watching this. They're just like, it's like Game of Thrones, but it's the little people, right? It's like, just let them fight. Let them fight. This is like the guy from Godzilla, Godzilla and King Kong or whatever. Let them fight, okay? And Abimelech chased them and fled before them, and many were overthrown and wounded, and even unto the entering of the gate. And Abimelech dwelt in Arumah, and Zebul thrust out Gaal and his brethren that they should not dwell in Shechem. And so they kicked out the guy who led this whole revolt from Shechem. Okay? And it came to pass the next day that the people went out to the field, and they told Abimelech. And he took the people and divided them into 3 companies, and laid wait in the field, and looked, and behold, and the people were come up forth out of the city, and they rose up against them and smote them. And Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward, and they stood in the entering of the gate of the city, and the other 2 companies ran on the people that were in the fields, and slew them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he took the city, and slew the people that was therein, and beat down the city, and sowed it with salt. Okay? So now your crops aren't going to grow. Now you have no means to ever uprise again, Shechemites. And when all the men of the tower of Shechem heard that, they entered into the hold in the house of the god Berith. I do not know anything about this god Berith. So apparently there's no consensus on who this Baal Berith is, or the god. This is El Berith, so the god Berith. The god Berith, some people think it might be, there's a legend that is the origin of the name of the city Beirut. Who knows, but this is apparently a god that the Shechemites worship, and he's not mentioned anywhere else in the Bible, okay? So we don't know who this is, okay? It might have to do with covenant. It might have to do with the word covenant. It's the god of the covenant. Who knows? So maybe they swore to some god, and if you deliver us, blah, 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 we'll get revenge on Israel or something. I don't know. But it was told to Abimelech, and all the men in the tower of Shechem were gathered together, and Abimelech gat him up to Mount Zalmon, and he and all the people that were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a bough from the trees, and took it and laid it on his shoulder, and said to the people that were with him, see what I've done, make haste and do what I've done. They're going to make some battering rams here and tear down this tower, okay? And all the people likewise cut down every man his bough, and followed Abimelech, and put them in the hold, and set the hold on fire. Oh, I'm sorry, they're just going to burn down this tower. So all the men of the tower of Shechem died also, about 1,000 men and women, okay? So typically you're going to have a city, and the city's going to have walls, and you're going to have a tower in the city, okay? And the tower is going to be the safe spot where you go, and it's your last resort. Kind of like on the siege of whatchamacallit and Lord of the Rings Part 2, okay, of the 2 towers. Helm's Deep, where you've got the one tower, and then you've got this walled part around it, but the tower is your last resort, okay? And then it says, and went Abimelech to Thebez, and encamped against Thebez, and took it. So Thebez, let's see. So they've already taken out Shechem, but apparently the Shechemites by this time have grown to Thebez. I'm not really sure why I can't find 2 pictures of Thebez and Shechem on the same map, but they're both in what is called the West Bank today. So you still have problems with West Bank people, okay? All the way back from back in the day. And it says, all of them in that city, they shut them in it and got them up to the top of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and went hard into the door of the tower and burned it with fire. And a certain woman cast a piece of the millstone on Abimelech's head, and all to break his skull. And so in other words, he's probably wearing a helmet or something, but she's casting a millstone. A millstone is literally what you're using on a rock surface, however you're rolling it or whatever, to grind flour. Okay, so it's a piece of a millstone. It's pretty heavy, big chunk of rock. Throws it down on him, and his skull gets cracked. Okay, he knows he's going to die, and then he says he called hastily to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw thy sword and slay me, that men not say to me, a woman slew him. So notice you have 2 men in a row killed by a woman, right? And thrust a man, and a young man thrust him through, and so he died. So if you ever heard me go through Psalm 83, it's going to mention basically the wars that take place with Gideon and the war that takes place with Deborah and Barak, okay, in the same sentence. And it's going to talk about all these people, and I believe this is a prophecy about terrorist groups, and it's saying, let them be as what happened to these kings of the Midianites and to this Shechemite, okay? Which is important because you have Canaanite king and then you have this Shechemite king. They both die of a mortal head wound. They're both Gentiles. They both die of a mortal head wound. They both die at the hand of a woman, okay? The Antichrist is a Gentile from the tribe of Dan, it seems like, but he's basically Gentile. And he dies of a mortal head wound, not at the hand of a man, okay? That's what these things seem to be signifying, and in Psalm 83, I suggest that it is a cryptic allusion to the Antichrist arising in the context of all these terrorists around Israel being defeated, finally, okay? Because notice how they defeat these people in the book of Judges and they never come back, but the terrorists today keep coming back, okay? You're going to see some kind of final defeat of them before we enter into the last days, okay? And then the last days goes global. It's not going to be about these little terrorist groups anymore. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man to his place. And God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did to his father, and the slaying his 70 brethren, and all the evil of the men of Shechem, did God render upon them heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jeroboam. Okay? So Jotham is basically like, you guys are going to kill each other. This is what he said. You're a bunch of worthless people who are just a bunch of haters, drinking haterade, and you went and did evil, and so he cursed them to kill each other, and they did. Okay? So the people of Shechem, Thebes, apparently they defeated him. They killed the people of Shechem, and then when he went after the king of Thebes, or the people of Thebes, that's when he dies at the hand of a woman. Okay? Now notice he says, and after Abimelech. Okay? This is why you want to pay attention when they say and after, okay? If it doesn't say and after, assume it's concurrent, okay? After Abimelech. So after Abimelech died, there arose and defended Israel Tola, the son of Puah, the son of Dodo, the son of Issachar, and he dwelt in Shamir in Mount Ephraim, okay? So I'm going to push pause right there because we mostly have to go from here, and the next big story we're going to cover is Samson, okay? When we get into Samson, we're going to cover the stuff that I believed happened with Samson and the Philistines in Crete, okay? So let's see. We just went up to 10. We're going to go through, I think, 17. So we just have 7 more chapters, and that will be it, okay? So we're going to cover all these guys. They're mostly little guys. There's not a ton of them. So really the rest of it is going to be about Jephthah and Samson, okay? So just so you guys understand where we are on timeline here, you're going to have, we're kind of through the first half, okay? So total number of years, I'm spitballing this, but we're roughly 206 years in. This is going to be roughly 400 years. So we're kind of about halfway through the book of Judges now. And then the rest, you're going to have a bunch of guys that are ruling, and you're not going to have a ton of drama in between them in terms of oppression. The next major enemy that's going to oppress them is going to be the Ammonites. Remember, the Ammonites were supporting the Moabites when they were oppressing them about 100 years prior. And in the days of the Philistine, in the days of Samuel, they're going to support the Philistines, okay? But they've never been the leading power that is going against them, okay? And so in the days of Jephthah, that's going to happen on the other side of the Jordan. That's where all that's going to take place, okay? And then the rest of it, you're going to see basically judges ruling, and you're not going to have major oppression until they get to the days of Samson. But the Philistines had been oppressing them the whole time. It's not like they had beaten back the Philistines and now they're coming. The Philistines had never really given ground to the Israelites after the days of Joshua, okay? And that's going to be when Samson finally subdues them. So this story is about Israel like screwing up and then God rescuing them again and again, but it is also about how they progressively subdue all their surrounding enemies, and the Philistines are really going to be the last ones to go, and that's why it all progresses toward that, okay? So we'll try to go over that the next time. Remember, we're about 200 years deep in this, and so that's going to put us around the year 1250, okay? So think about it like this. You want to understand your sea peoples if you're going to be paying attention to this, because your sea peoples are rising in power at this time, and in the next 20, 30 years, they're going to overthrow Hattusa, okay? So it looks like the Hattusa is the capital of the Hittites in Turkey, beginning in 1650. So that's going to be around the time the Israelites go into Egypt, but they're not in captivity yet. They're going in there as friends. And then the Hittites apparently around that time are going to go up and sack major parts of Turkey from Canaan, and they're going to rule from Hattusa. And it is going to be destroyed in 1200 BC. So we're probably like 40 years shy of Hattusa getting destroyed, and it does look like the Sea Peoples are going to be a major part in Hattusa falling apart. They're just going to keep raiding and pillaging it, and they're not going to be able to hold it together. But you also have Japhethites all around them, and then the Lydians, who are a Semitic tribe, who don't really want to be ruled by them in the first place. Okay, so they don't have much to hold it together. Their main frenemies would have been the Amorites, and the Amorites are getting their butts kicked, and then they've lost a big army to Joshua. Okay, and so they're on the decline through the whole period of Judges, and eventually Hattusa is going to get sacked. Okay, so here's where Hattusa is. This empire is falling apart, and this is going to break up into a bunch of small little city-states and different tribes. You're going to have the Trojans over here. You're going to have Javan, who's the father of the Greeks, over here. You're going to have other Greek tribes that are going to be over here in these islands. You're going to have Lydians that are going to be right here. You're going to have sons of Magog and Meshech and these guys that are going to be up in here. And they're still migrating out, but they've still left cities behind. And with the fall of the Hittites, these cities are just going to kind of thrive and flourish and be relatively independent, because you've got this united kingdom of the Mitanni that is kind of like in the midst there. Let's see, Mitanni. And it is going to last till about 1260 BC. And it looks like, so they're getting close, that kingdom is getting close to falling apart too, okay? So as these two kingdoms fall apart, remember the Mitanni is probably going to be a mix of Aramean and Amorite peoples. That's going to be kind of a union to maintain some strength, probably against the Amorites, because the Amorites are going to be down here, and then they're going to go over here and take over Babylon, and then they're going to fall. Okay, well they're going to completely lose their links to Canaan when the Israelites come in, so they're toast. And then the Hittites are going to lose their links to the Amorites and to Canaan because of the Israelites, so they're toast. Okay, the reason these two kingdoms were able to arise is because they had their relatives down here who had this strong city, and they were a buffer between them and Egypt, but they had a ton of trade going on, and so they were doing good, and they were able to trade with them. Now they're basically surrounded by each other, and the Mitanni doesn't really have a reason once they're gone to be this strong united kingdom to maintain a strength against them. Okay, so the Mitanni kingdom seems to fall apart, and what's going to happen is then the Arameans are going to start to rise, and the Assyrians are going to start to rise after that. Okay, those are going to be, Arameans are down here around Damascus, Assyrians are up here, up by the Tigris, and it's going to be a while before they arise and become strong kingdoms, because they've been oppressed by other peoples. They've been oppressed by Babylonians and the Kassites and the Amorites, and probably this united kingdom has kept them from growing much, and the Hittites and stuff like that. And then they're eventually going to get to a point where they're going to be allowed to thrive and grow their own kingdoms. Okay, but that's going to be not for like another 200-300 years, where they start to get big and powerful to the point where they're conquering outside peoples. Okay, and in the meantime, you're going to find the Arameans get completely put down and subdued by David. Okay, just so they don't get uppity. And you're going to see this dynasty, I forget, King Hadad is his name, that is going to rule over the Amorites after that. Okay, so that's where we are. Again, we're in the period known as the Bronze Age collapse. '12th century BC. We're about 100 years shy of that. Okay, the Bronze Age collapse seems to be something that comes to take place. So 1200 BC is around the time when it starts. Remember, we're about 100 years shy of Samson, and the Bronze Age collapse. Remember, you're going to have the Sea Peoples raiding and pillaging here, and I believe Samson is going to be the cause of the Bronze Age collapse. But we'll see. We'll get to that part in a bit. So, hope you guys are blessed by this. Remember, don't ever try to be a Shechemite and take over Israel. It's not going to go well for you. And have a great rest of your week. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.